Hello, welcome back to the library. So today's subset discussion involves 3DO and their series, Army Men. So for those of you too young to remember, 3DO themselves used to be an actual console manufacturer with the 3DO. Once that subsided, they became a third-party publisher just like Sega did, and obviously they published on the PlayStation, the N64, and a bunch of the portables. One of their first series as a third-party publisher was a goofy little series called Army Men. Now, at the time, it was a really novel idea. Essentially, the way it worked was the old school, very retro plastic Army Men toys, the little green ones you'd buy and get like 100 per pack and so forth, that were just stuck in their positions. Everything else around them was real. So it'd be real explosions, real dirt, real world, essentially giving the plastic men their own planet, if you wanted to get that far out. And despite having some really bad difficulty spikes and some oddball control choices here and there, Army Men 3D did really well for itself, and it became one of 3DO's first greatest hits on the PlayStation. And because of its sales, they were like, all right, we're going to start making sequels to it. But rather than just making straightforward sequels, they decided that they were going to build their own universe. And that universe building essentially created a 10-game legacy on the PlayStation. It's one of the largest sets in the PlayStation's library, second only to like sports games like Madden and so forth. So, rather than go chronological, we're going to go by the series that the games became. Now, Army Men 3D Original was obviously the first and only game truly of its type. And we're going to jump around a bit because I want to save my favorite ones for last. So first, we're going to jump into what was the almost last game, Army Men Green Rogue. This was very late in the system's life. In fact, I think it was the second to last game they ever released for the PlayStation. And at the time it came out, 3DO was in a lot of trouble financially. They were struggling to make ends meet. You could tell they were doing anything they could because they just kept pumping out game after game after game. And Green Rogue is one of the games that suffered from that. It is extremely generic in terms of visuals and gameplay and control. Like, the bullets themselves look like Pong dots. Like, that's how bad it was. As a game itself, it's not bad, but it's definitely not on par with some of those games we'll talk about later. With the solo guys out of the way, we get to the series of games. Probably the most tragic of the series is the 4 games in the World War series. This was where 3DO was like, hey, let's try something different. Let's start getting thematic. Let's take things further. Here, in each game, World War introduced more split-screen ideas, more global ideas. You could jump into turrets and so forth. I think even in the first one, you could get into a tank and so forth. While the idea was sound, unfortunately, this series was also caught up in their financial dire straits situation because when you jumped from the first World War, it showed promise. And then Final Front and Land Air Sea came out, and it was just like, what in the hell happened, guys? The games were so cookie cutter of each other that literally the menu system, the starting menu, you could literally tell they just repurposed the previous game's engine and just changed a few things here and there. It was really bad, and it was really rough, and it was really annoyingly hard. However, they had a beautiful saving grace with what would become the final Army Men game on the PlayStation, and that was World War Team Assault. This game is what I would call the Contra Force. Is it Contra Force? It's Contra 3 from the NES of the Army Men series. Rather than just being a single soldier running along doing your thing, you actually had 2 team members you had to control at once. You could toggle between them as you were playing. And from the 2 characters you selected, which weren't from the normal selection of characters, like there was no Sarge, there's no the guys from from Air Attack and so forth. Each of them had their own abilities and their own weapon styles. So you had to basically figure out what the best combination to use was in each situation. And all the levels would have choices. Like, it would actually branch out. Do you want to, go into this cliff, go into this canyon and, take on these guys? Or go into this town and hope there's nobody there hiding for you? it was a good saving role, but it's still not as good as the other games in the library. The next subset was Army Men, Sarge's Heroes 1 and 2. And this is where things kind of got really weird. At some point, 3DO changed how they viewed the Army Men games. On one hand, some of the games went off to continue this sort of like you were watching old war films, because they would always start with an old timey-wimey film reel in black and white, talking about the good fight on the front and everything. And then when it got to Sarge's Heroes 2, they almost went full Toy Story. They actually get sucked into the actual real world, and they're fighting on tables, in kitchens, in living rooms, and so forth. They fight giant other toys and everything. And that second theme of them actually being in other toys made its way into our final series, and my actual favorite of the entire Army Men group, which was Army Men Air Attack 1 and 2. Now, if you have never played these before, but you're an old school gamer, I will say one word that will make you smile and want to play them. Strike. Army Men Air Attack 1 and 2 are quite literally ripoffs of EA's famous Strike series, Nuclear Strike, Soviet Strike, going all the way back to the Genesis and Super Nintendo with Jungle, Urban, and Desert Strike. And the games are so well made, and the control is practically perfect, and the difficulty settings are just right. And there's interesting layouts and enemy patterns and so forth. And it's a really big shame that they weren't able to keep moving forward with that series because of their eventual closure and so forth. Out of the 10 games in the Army Men subset, I would easily say Air Attack 1 and 2 for sure, if you want to pick up. Army Men 3D for if you want to have the alpha of the game, and then Team Assault for the Omega. Most of the other games are kind of like, you don't really need them unless you're going for a full set. Sarge's Heroes 2 had a lot of promise, but man, is it rough. In trying to record footage for this episode, I just couldn't stay alive long enough to get more than the first area is done. It was brutal. If you're into variants, you have nothing to worry about here. Quick little variant hunter. As far as greatest hits go, it's just Army Men 3D and Air Attack. And then late in the PlayStation's life, they released the Gold Pack, which is a triple pack of Army Men 3D, Air Attack, and Sarge's Heroes 1. I don't know why they wouldn't have included Sarge's Heroes 2 instead, because it was a much better game. But yeah, that's all I have to worry about for variants, along with the 2 greatest hits. If you have any questions, let me know. If you're into using eBay for your purchases, I do have an affiliate link down below. I make a couple of cents every month. It's all good. If you have any questions, guys, hit me in the comment section below. I will see you next time. Have a good one.